Hi guys, TotallydubbedHD here, and today I'm doing a video review on the JBL Bar 2.1 Deep Bass. Now this model can be found for around £300 in the UK and $300 in the US. If you live in these territories or indeed elsewhere, the locally link in the description below will take you to your localized Amazon store. Now before getting into this review, this is not to be confused with the JBL Bar 2.1. I know the naming isn't too clear, but the Deep Bass variant is the later model. In other words, this is the 2020 model as far as I'm aware. So without further ado, let's get into the review. So first off, let's talk about the build quality and design of the soundbar. Now the dimensions will be on your screen. It's a quite sleek soundbar and it fits perfectly under my TV. Now the wireless subwoofer over here is recommended to be about 1 meter apart from the soundbar. Of course, your mileage may vary depending on your room's acoustics, but that's what they suggest. Now in terms of wireless, what they mean is that it's wireless from the connectivity from the soundbar to the subwoofer, but you still need to plug it in to power. Obviously that might seem pretty obvious, but just thought to point it out. Now in terms of the soundbar itself, it's got a nice sleek look. It's got a kind of glossy-esque greyish look, which does fit into most setups. I also like the fact that it's quite thin. In other words, it will fit under most TV setups. As you can see over here, it will fit under my TV if I wanted it to be the case. Now at the top of the soundbar there is an on and off volume down, volume up and input change, which is great to see. It's also worth bearing in mind there is a little LED indicator which is over here. It's pretty clear and it's at the center of the soundbar, which makes it quite nice because when you've got it centered over your TV it's quite easy to see. Now as for the remote control, I feel like it's a good size and a sort of weight to it. It's not too small, in other words it'll get lost quite easily, and neither is it too big, making it kind of somewhat pointless. Now in my case what I found is the controls are somewhat basic, but they do provide you what you need. So for example, if you want to change inputs, you've got TV, Bluetooth and HDMI. So yes, you do have Bluetooth connectivity, so you can connect this wirelessly as well to, let's say, your smartphone and play back music over Bluetooth. It's also worth bearing in mind there's an optical Toslink input as well. There's a USB, but the USB is purely for service only. In other words, if you want to update its firmware. There's a button over here for bass. Now your mileage may vary depending on your room acoustics, but in my case I've got it on medium. So you've got 3 settings, low, medium and high, and I personally found that in terms of sound quality wise, medium gave the best sort of balanced sounds, and I'll get into this in the sound quality section. Other than that, you've got plus and minus for volume, and then you've got a mute, and you can also link these controls up, as in the plus and minus and mute functions, and on and off with your TV's remote via a syncing ability that it's got, and you can find out how to do that via the JBL manual. And now let's get on to the sound quality section of this review. Now before getting to a little sound demo for you guys, I do want to mention a few things. So first off, in terms of the driver configuration, it's got 4 racetrack drivers, which I presume they're JBL drivers. You've got 2 1-inch tweeters within the soundbar, and then the subwoofer itself is a 6.5-inch subwoofer. Now in terms of the frequency range, you're looking at 40 Hz up to 20 kHz. So yes, there's going to be a cutoff in the lower end frequencies, and I'm going to touch upon this in just a bit. But of course, what I'm going to do now is give you a sound demo. So tune in to listening to the soundbar, and I'll be cycling through the bass presets as well.
You're so high, then learn how to fly. It's the only way I know how to play this game to success. I'm not quite sussed it yet. When I reach the brink, don't stop to think. I always think, and now I think it's my imagination is constantly racing 1,000 miles ahead. I'm living in my own mind, but it's flowing. The more it's hoping. But when I reach the brink, don't stop to think. I always think, and now
So hopefully that little sound demo gave you a little bit of an indication how the soundbar sounds like. And of course this is coming via YouTube, so therefore it's compressed and via my own camera. So therefore I would very much suggest listening to it in person. But of course you're watching this review and you want to find out how does it actually sound. So first off, in terms of the actual song I used, it's from Priya. The song name is Falling. If you're interested in watching that video, do check her out in the description below so you can reference it for yourself. Furthermore to Priya's track, of course I listen to other tracks on YouTube that I'm accustomed to, and also also put it through a 4K Blu-ray player to watch how it deals with movies, so be it from dialogue and actions and how it switches from there, and watch regular terrestrial TV, be it in HD or non-HD, to also see how it's scaled with the Dolby Digital codec. In this case, the soundbar dealt perfectly with the digital Dolby codec. It picked it up straight away as soon as, let's say, when I moved on to BBC to HD, it would pick it up straight away and therefore enhance the sound over your normal PCM input. Now, in terms of the actual sound quality of the soundbar, let's break it down in terms of the overall frequencies. First off, let's talk about the sub-bass, which is the rumble. Now, that 6.5-inch subwoofer does produce a lot of bass. Now, as I said before, I would suggest using it on the mid setting. Again, depending on your room acoustic, in terms of sizing, and in terms of how much bass you actually want, I would personally say that that gives a sort of good blend. Low was a little bit too tame, but could be good for nighttime viewing, whilst high was a little bit too over bloated, specifically pushing up the mid bass a bit more than it should be. But in terms of the sub bass, yes, there is a cutoff. It cuts off around 40 Hz. Is that something you should be concerned about? Well, at this price range, no. Of course, if you do spend more money, about £150 to £200 more, you're going to get subwoofers which are a little bit better equipped. In other words, they'll go down to 35 Hz or something. Most subwoofers, specifically in these sort of enclosure, in terms of these setups, those soundbar setups, will somewhat tail off there. They're never going to compete with professional subwoofers which cut off at around, let's say, 20 Hz or something like that. Now, aside the sub bass, the mid bass was pretty good. I will say that in terms of the control, it was there. It had plenty of thump, again, depending on the setting that you use. But in my case, I found that I was very much excited with the music I was listening to and very much impressed. Now, in terms of the mids, which are normally pretty heavily impacted when you have a lot of a mid bass shunt, specifically when it comes to this JBL soundbar, I was actually pleasantly surprised to find that the mids were actually pretty forward sounding. Now, don't get me wrong, it is a little bit recessed, it is going to be a little bit pushed back, and given that it's a JBL soundbar, it does have a somewhat JBL sound signature, which is usually a little bit V-shaped and a little bit warm sounding. That's not necessarily a bad thing. When I was testing through, again, watching the news on terrestrial TV, watching YouTube, even my own commentaries on YouTube, albeit from watching movies where there's dialogue and then there's action straight away, it actually dealt with the mid-range really, really well, which somewhat was surprising because at £300 I was expecting it to be somewhat lackluster in this department. Then moving on to the highs, I felt that they delivered a decent amount of extension. Yes, it did feel a little bit rolled off at the top end, but on the whole I felt quite excited when I was listening to music and watching movies. I had no complaints into the highs and they weren't sibilant either. Now, I would have liked to have the ability to customize the EQ. It's very basic that I've only got these sub-bass, or should I say mid-bass, that I get to control. I would have liked that control of the treble as well. That extra switch would have been good, if you want to have a different sort of setting. Now, what really got me by surprise was the overall soundstage. Now, normally for around £300, $300, you'll find a soundbar sounds a little bit claustrophobic. Sounds a bit closed, jumbled up, and it doesn't deal with instrument separations that well. Whereas this dealt with it marvelously. I was really, really surprised. And therefore, the overall width and depth of the soundstage felt great. So watching movies, so for example, I was watching Transformers whilst doing my tests, I felt I was really involved in the movie. I was watching it and I felt like it was kind of like a cinematic experience. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not going to reproduce that cinematic experience like Dolby Atmos or DTSX is going to do in more expensive soundbars. But given its price point and given what you should expect at this price point, I think you'll be absolutely blown away by how involved and how great this soundbar sounds on the whole. What I'm trying to say over here is that the entire sound frequency range was pretty impressive, and coupled with the soundstage, I was actually left pretty jaw-dropped by the overall sound quality of this soundbar. I couldn't think of a place where I would really improve it. As I mentioned, I would have liked an EQ for the treble adjustment or the highs, but other than that, at this price range, there's really not much to complain about. And now this leads me on to my verdict, and you can pretty much see where I'm going with this. Now, the JBL Bar 2.1 deep bass, other than having an elongated name, is fantastic. It has got a good build quality, it's got a remote control, it's got different wireless connectivity options and wired connections, it's got a wireless subwoofer included, and most importantly, it sounds good, be it from its overall sound frequencies to the actual soundstage. It does a great job, and truthfully, I couldn't find a flaw at this price point. If you want to spend more, you're going to get better sound, and of course, you're going to get more support for different codecs. But if you're at this price range and you're looking for this at this budget, then truthfully, I can't find a better soundbar on the market. Now, if you can't find this soundbar for any given reason, I'll list down some alternatives in the description below for you guys to kind of scroll through and actually look through. And if you've got any questions, let me know in the comments below. Hopefully you've enjoyed this unpaid, unbiased, independent review. Drop a like, subscribe, favorite, share. I very much appreciate your time. All right, guys, I've been Totally Dubbed. Take care and bye-bye.